Tonight, the shoreline is quiet, and the sea breathes in long, patient rhythms beneath the stars. Far beyond the dark water, imagination begins to wander toward places no map can fully hold. Settle in now, get comfortable, and let the weight of the day drift gently away as we begin a slow journey into one of history's most enduring dreams. Here on Told History, we share calm, true stories from the past, told slowly to help you rest while wandering through distant times. If you enjoy these quiet journeys, please like and subscribe to support the channel. And now, as the waves move softly through the night, let us return to the old and haunting question of what the sea may still be keeping. Chapter 1. Where the Sea Keeps Its Secrets. At the edge of the water, human thought has long become gentle and restless at once, stirred by the feeling that the horizon is hiding something. The ocean seems patient enough to keep 1,000 memories below its surface, and old enough to let only a few fragments rise again in story, dream, and wonder. In many places, the sea has inspired the same quiet idea that beneath the rolling dark, whole worlds may rest undisturbed. Harbours vanish, coasts change, and storms redraw the outlines of the land. Over time, memory softens these losses, and what was once a village, a temple, or a shoreline can begin to feel like something larger, stranger, and almost sacred. Tonight, we are not rushing to solve Atlantis as if it were only a puzzle waiting for the right clever hand. Instead, we will let the legend unfold slowly, the way a tide reveals and conceals the shore. Atlantis has endured for centuries not simply because people sought proof, but because the story itself speaks to longing, loss, and mystery. The name Atlantis comes to us most famously from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who wrote about it in 2 dialogues called Timaeus and Critias in the 4th century BCE. In his telling, Atlantis was a powerful island realm beyond the Pillars of Heracles, often understood as the Strait of Gibraltar, before it fell into ruin beneath the sea. Plato described this lost land as wealthy, ordered, and ambitious, blessed with rich natural resources and grand works of engineering. Yet his story was never only about splendour. It was also about pride, decline, and sudden destruction. In that way, Atlantis entered history not merely as a place, but as a warning wrapped in beauty and distance. Whether Plato meant Atlantis as history, allegory, or something between the two has been debated for a very long time. Many scholars believe he created or reshaped the tale to explore ideas about virtue and power. Still, once such a story is released into the world, it rarely remains where it began. It drifts, gathers meaning, and becomes larger than its source. This is often how sea legends endure. A single account meets older fears, older hopes, and older memories already living within a culture. Then, little by little, the tale settles into the imagination. It is retold beside fires, in books, in classrooms, and in quiet moments by the shore, until it feels less like invention and more like a half-remembered inheritance. Long before modern divers and sonar maps, people looked across open water and sensed that the sea could both connect and erase. It carried traders, pilgrims, and sailors between distant worlds, but it also swallowed ships, reshaped coasts, and hid what it took. That double nature made the ocean a perfect home for stories about vanished kingdoms and sunken cities. Many cultures have imagined lands claimed by water. In Welsh legend, there is Cantra ar Gwaelod, a low kingdom said to have been lost beneath the sea. In Breton tradition, the city of Is was overwhelmed by the ocean. Such stories differ in detail, but they share a tender ache, the sense that something precious once stood where only waves remain. Elsewhere, memories of flood and submergence appear in forms both sacred and local. Some tales may have grown from real storms, rising seas, or earthquakes that changed familiar coastlines forever. Others may belong more fully to the language of myth. Yet all of them suggest the same human instinct. When land disappears, imagination continues the map beneath the water. There is a special stillness in this instinct, especially at night. The dark sea reveals very little, and because it reveals so little, the mind is free to wander. Beneath that black mirror, it becomes easy to picture stairways dressed in sand, broken columns resting in silence, and streets where no footsteps sound anymore, only the slow turning of the tide. Of course, history asks careful questions where legend offers wide horizons. Historians, archaeologists and geologists work patiently, separating what can be tested from what can only be imagined. Their task is not to drain wonder from old stories, but to understand how such stories were born, and whether fragments of lived experience may still rest inside them like shells in sediment. That is why Atlantis continues to fascinate. It lives in two worlds at once. In one world it belongs to philosophy, literature, and the long history of storytelling. In the other, it touches the human desire to believe that the Earth still holds undiscovered chapters. Between those worlds lies the calm uncertainty that makes this legend so difficult to leave behind. As we move through this story, we will stay close to what is known, and gentle with what is not. Some places beneath the sea are unquestionably real. Drowned ports, submerged roads, and ancient settlements revealed by changing shorelines and underwater study. Around these discoveries, the larger dream of Atlantis often gathers, borrowing their weight while remaining elusive itself. The sea preserves and conceals in unequal measure. Wood decays, stone shifts, and currents scatter what once seemed fixed forever. Yet sometimes an outline remains, a wall, a harbour basin, a flight of worn steps. These fragments do not always confirm the grandest legends, but they remind us that loss is part of history, and not all ruins stand above ground. There is also something deeply human in imagining a city sleeping below the waves. Such a vision turns destruction into stillness. Instead of fire and panic, the mind sees quiet halls, drifting silt, and fish moving through spaces once built for ceremony or trade. In that softened picture, catastrophe becomes distant enough to contemplate, and sorrow becomes almost serene. Perhaps this is why the legend returns so easily in times of change. When the world feels uncertain, stories of lost places speak to hidden continuity. They suggest that what disappears is not always gone beyond thought. Somewhere, beneath confusion and time, a shape remains. Even if we cannot reach it, we can circle it in memory and call it by name. For ancient listeners, Atlantis may have sounded like a warning about power and moral decline. For later generations, it became a mystery to chase across maps and oceans. For us tonight, it can be something quieter, a meeting place between fact and imagination, where the past is felt not only through evidence, but through the hush surrounding what evidence cannot keep. In the chapters ahead, we will drift between Plato's account, later interpretations, and the real underwater sites that have encouraged fresh speculation. We will consider earthquakes, volcanic disasters, flooded coastlines, and the irresistible habit of linking every submerged stone to a greater forgotten world. But for now, we remain here at the threshold, listening to the oldest part of the story. That oldest part is not a date or a location. It is a feeling. It begins when a person stands beside the sea and senses that the water is covering more than depth alone. The waves seem to pass over memory itself, smoothing it, hiding it, and returning only traces. From that feeling, legends grow naturally, as if the ocean were thinking in symbols. So let Atlantis remain, for this moment, exactly where it has always been strongest, just beyond certainty. Not disproved enough to disappear, not proven enough to settle. It waits in that suspended space where history meets desire. And because it waits there, generations continue to approach it gently, like travellers pausing at night before a dark and whispering shore. As the tide moves in and out, the legend breathes with it, never fully arriving, never fully receding. Tonight we begin not with answers, but with patience, allowing myth, memory and history to share the same quiet water. Somewhere beneath that surface, whether in stone or only in imagination, a lost world continues to call, and we will follow softly. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. We drift now to ancient Greece, where the earliest surviving written Atlantis story first appears. In the 4th century BCE, the philosopher Plato composed 2 dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. Within their careful exchanges, Atlantis enters the historical imagination not as proven record, but as a tale carried through memory, philosophy and moral reflection, a distant island beginning to stir beneath the mind's quiet surface. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. Plato wrote during a time when Athens reflected deeply on justice, power, and the fate of states. His dialogues often used imagined conversations to explore serious ideas. Atlantis appears in that setting. It is presented through layered retelling, passing from Egyptian priests to the Athenian lawgiver Solon, and later into Plato's own philosophical world, already sounding like history, and yet also like an echo shaped by thought. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. In Timaeus, the story arrives gently, almost as background to a wider meditation on the cosmos and the ideal society. Critias then begins to unfold the island's details more fully. Together, these texts form the oldest known written source for Atlantis. Everything that follows in later centuries, every map, theory and dream can be traced back to these calm pages composed in classical Greece. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. Plato places Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Heracles, the ancient name usually linked with the Strait of Gibraltar. To Greek ears, this marked a threshold. Beyond it lay the great outer sea, vast and uncertain. By placing Atlantis there, Plato set his island at the edge of the known world, far enough to invite wonder, yet close enough to feel almost reachable in the drifting imagination. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. The island realm is described as powerful and prosperous, blessed with fertile plains, abundant resources and skilled organisation. This is not a crude or shadowy place. It appears ordered, wealthy and impressive, a society whose strength seemed woven into its land, its waterways and its disciplined arrangement. As the narrative unfolds, Atlantis glows with the calm grandeur of something both Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. One of the most memorable images is the capital city with its rings of land and water. These circular bands create a pattern that feels almost dreamlike in its symmetry. Bridges crossed the channels, and ships could move inward toward the centre. Even now, that design lingers in the mind, not only as architecture, but as one of the great enduring symbols of the Atlantis legend. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. Plato's account also speaks of temples, harbours, walls and public works that suggest remarkable planning. The city seems engineered for beauty, ritual and command. There is a sense of polished stone, measured spaces and carefully directed movement. It is easy to understand why later generations return to these passages again and again, searching them for clues while also surrendering to their quiet power as storytelling. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. At the heart of the island story stands a civilization that is not merely rich, but disciplined. Its plain is carefully divided, its infrastructure maintained, and its people organised under rulers whose line, Plato says, descended from Poseidon. Here myth and civic design are folded together. Divine ancestry lives beside canals and roads, giving Atlantis the unusual texture of both sacred tale and... Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. The sea god Poseidon plays an important role in Plato's account. He is said to have shaped the central hill and created the circular rings around it. This touch of divine origin reminds us that Atlantis is never offered in the manner of modern archaeology. Its world includes gods, sacred lineages and marvellous design, elements that place it gently between religious myth, literary construction and cultural memory. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. Plato describes the Atlanteans as possessors of great wealth, including metals, timber, fertile soil, and a thriving naval power. Their harbours were busy, their lands productive, and their influence broad. For a listener sinking towards sleep, the picture is almost luminous. An island kingdom where abundance seemed to rise naturally from earth and sea, ordered into a civilization of elegant confidence and measured splendour. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. Yet even in these rich descriptions, there is a quiet caution. Atlantis reaches us only through Plato's literary and philosophical works. There are no surviving contemporary inscriptions from Atlantis itself, no agreed physical remains, no clear external ancient record confirming the kingdom as historical fact. What we have is precious, but limited, a story preserved in writing, suspended between... Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. This uncertainty is part of what makes Atlantis endure. If Plato had named a familiar city, fixed in ordinary geography, the story might have rested long ago. Instead, he offered a place both vivid and unreachable. It has structure, atmosphere and consequence, yet remains outside confirmation. That balance allows the mind to wander comfortably, neither forced into belief nor pushed fully away from wonder and pushed fully away from wonder and possibility. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. Many scholars read Atlantis as a philosophical device, a narrative constructed to explore themes that mattered deeply to Plato: virtue, power, corruption, and the ideal state. In this view, the island is less a travel report than a mirror held up to human societies. Its grandeur matters because it sets the stage for decline, allowing reflection to emerge softly from the rhythm of the tale, Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. Others, across many centuries, have wondered whether Plato's account preserved a faint memory of real events, perhaps distant seafaring cultures, natural disasters, or older legends transformed by retelling. No single theory has one universal agreement. Still, the possibility itself has a soothing pull. It invites us to imagine history as layered water, where fact, memory and myth settle together in Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. It is helpful to remember that Plato's dialogues were not modern histories. They are works of philosophy shaped by dramatic conversation, selective detail, and moral intention. Their purpose was not simply to archive events in neutral sequence. Because of that, Atlantis should be approached with gentleness, respected as an ancient source, but not treated as straightforward proof of a vanished empire beneath the sea. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. Even the chain of transmission inside the story feels like a corridor of echoes. Egyptian priests tell Solon. Solon carries the account into Greece. Later, through generations, Critias recounts it again. Finally, Plato gives it written form. Each step adds distance and texture. We are never standing beside Atlantis itself, only listening as the tale passes. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. The mention of Egypt in the transmission story adds another layer of fascination. To Greek audiences, Egypt represented antiquity, wisdom, and great age. By placing Atlantis within knowledge said to come from Egyptian priests, Plato gave the account a deeper antiquarian glow. It sounds ancient even within antiquity, as though the story were already old when Greece first turned to hear it in the hush of philosophy. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. There is also something restful in the way Atlantis enters the record, not through conquest chronicles or merchant logs, but through conversation. Learned voices speak, remember, and interpret. The island is introduced not with urgency, but with reflective patience. That slow arrival shapes the myth itself. Atlantis does not burst upon us. It gathers like evening light. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. The city Plato sketches is magnificent, but also highly ordered. This order matters. Streets, waterways, and sacred spaces seem arranged according to reason and hierarchy. Atlantis becomes a vision of organized power, beautiful, efficient, and confident in itself. Such careful design may be one reason the image endures. It satisfies the mind's longing for pattern, while leaving another. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. To listeners today, the rings of Atlantis can feel almost symbolic. Circles within circles, sea held by stone, movement guided inward toward a shining centre. Whether Plato intended literal description, idealized architecture, or both, the effect remains hypnotic. The image floats between map and metaphor, a city designed not only to be pictured, but to be contemplated slowly, like ripples widening across. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. As the chapter deepens, we can rest in a simple truth. Atlantis first survives in writing because Plato wrote it down. That is the firm ground beneath all later speculation. Before excavations, before documentaries, before bold theories and doubtful maps, there were dialogues, copied by hands across generations, carrying this island story from the ancient Mediterranean into the vast memory of the world. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. This is why Atlantis belongs partly to history and partly to literature. It has an origin we can identify, 4th century BCE, in the works of Plato, yet its subject remains elusive. We know where the story comes from, but not whether the place itself ever stood in the world as described. That tension does not disturb the tale. It gives the tale its enduring breath. It gives the tale its enduring breath. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. So we linger with ancient Greece, with philosophers speaking across shaded courtyards of thought, and with a distant island placed beyond the western gates of the known sea. Here, Atlantis begins for us, not in certainty, but in articulate wonder. The account is detailed enough to picture, uncertain enough to question, and beautiful enough to return to whenever the mind seeks calm and mystery together. Chapter 2. The First Whisper of Atlantis. As we leave Plato's pages for now, the island remains suspended before us, ringed with water, rich with temples and harbours, and softened by the haze between memory and invention. We need not force a conclusion tonight. It is enough to know that Atlantis first whispered through philosophy, and that from this whisper grew centuries of searching, all beginning with a story told slowly in ancient Greece. Chapter 3. A City Bright Before the Drowning. Let us enter Atlantis, as imagination has long shaped it, not as proven ruin, but as a vision gently borrowed from Plato. Here, broad canals catch the afternoon light, and clear water moves in slow circles around ordered walls. The city seems designed for both comfort and wonder, where human skill and quiet beauty rest side by side beneath a calm and generous sun. Chapter 3. A City. Bright Before the Drowning. In this dream of the island city, the harbours are sheltered and deep, holding ships that drift rather than hurry. Their hulls creak softly against worn stone quays, while the smell of salt rises with the tide. Nothing feels harsh here. Even trade and labour seem to move with patience, as though the city itself teaches every visitor to breathe more slowly. Chapter 3. A City Bright. Before the drowning, Plato described Atlantis as a place of rings of land and water, arranged with striking order. From that ancient sketch, many later minds have painted avenues, bridges, and shining courts. We follow that tradition now, gently and knowingly. This is not archaeology, but a resting place for thought, a soft reconstruction of how a bright and distant capital may have appeared at its height. Chapter 3. A City Bright Before the Drowning. Picture the outer canals first, wide enough for graceful movement and lined with stone that has gathered warmth all day. Small boats pass along them with hardly a ripple. Sunlight flickers across the water and climbs the walls in wavering bands. Along the edges, steps lead down toward the surface, where hands may touch the coolness and feel the city answering in quiet reflections. Chapter 3. A City Bright Before the Drowning. Beyond the canals stand broad ways and courtyards open to the sky. The paving stones hold the memory of noon, and each footfall would meet a gentle stored warmth. Fountains speak in low voices from shaded corners. Their steady music softens every space, so that even in the centre of a powerful city, one might hear water before hearing any human word or distant call. Chapter 3. A City Bright Before the Drowning. Homes rise in ordered clusters, their walls bright in the sun, their thresholds swept and calm. Balconies look over passing water, and colonnades cast patient strips of shadow across the streets. Nothing seems cramped or accidental. In this imagined Atlantis, design and daily life belong together. Beauty is not reserved for temples alone. It is woven into ordinary doorways, windows. Chapter 3. A City Bright Before the Drowning. The air near the harbour carries the clean scent of brine, mingled with damp rope, cedar planks, and drying nets. Yet even these working smells feel softened by distance and sun. Gulls may circle overhead, but their voices fade into the broad hush of sea and stone. Everything in this city seems held inside a larger silence, peaceful and steady as the breathing of sleep. Chapter 3. A City. Bright before the drowning, traders arrive from beyond the horizon, entering protected waters where currents lose their force. Their vessels glide inward past watchful towers and neat embankments. Here the sea is welcomed, but also guided. That balance is part of the old fascination with Atlantis, a place imagined not as wild conquest over nature, but as careful conversation with it, shaped through channels, walls, and measured openings. Chapter 3. A City. Bright Before the Drowning. In the marketplaces, motion need not be loud. We can imagine fruit laid in careful rows, cloth stirring lightly in the breeze, and jars of oil or wine catching gold light on their curved sides. Voices would rise and fall in friendly exchange, never rushed in our nighttime telling. Even commerce becomes gentle here, another rhythm in the city rather than a disturbance within it. Chapter 3. A City. Bright Before the Drowning. At the centre, perhaps, stand larger courts and sacred places, where polished stone reflects the sky. Plato wrote of grandeur, and later generations added splendour in their own minds. So we may picture shining surfaces, carved pillars, and quiet pools placed to mirror light. Yet the true heart of this vision is not luxury alone, it is harmony, the feeling that every part answers another. Chapter 3. A City Bright Before the Drowning. Bridges cross the inner waterways in smooth intervals, linking district to district with easy grace. To stand upon one would be to watch narrow wakes unfold below and vanish again into brightness. On either side, the city opens like a pattern too balanced to be accidental. It invites the mind to rest in symmetry, circles, lines, and distances, all held in calm proportion, beneath the afternoon sky. Chapter 3. A City Bright. Before the drowning. There is comfort in imagining a place where engineering is not cold, but deeply humane. The canals are useful, yes, and the harbours carefully planned, yet they also bring light, coolness, and space into daily life. Water becomes roadway, mirror, and companion. Stone becomes shelter and beauty together. In that union lies much of Atlantis' lasting power over the sleeping and waking imagination. Chapter 3. A city bright before the drowning. Perhaps children run along shaded paths near the water, their steps quick and fleeting across the warm ground. Perhaps older citizens sit beneath covered walkways where sea air drifts inland and fountains temper the heat. We cannot know these lives, of course, and should not pretend to. Still, such gentle details help the legendary city feel inhabited, less like a monument, more like a memoted, less like a monument, more like a memory. Chapter 3. A city bright before the drowning. In this quiet reconstruction, the sunlight has a special role. It slides over pale walls, flashes on bronze fittings, and settles softly into sheltered courts. Morning would have been silver and cool by the canals. Midday would bring stronger brilliance. By evening, every surface would glow with a dimmer warmth, as if the city itself were lit from within by the stored kindness of the day. Chapter 3. A city bright. Before the drowning. It is easy to understand why later ages lingered over the image of Atlantis. The story offers more than loss. It offers completion first, a city fully formed, prosperous, ordered and serene. Before any drowning, before any warning or collapse, there is this shining interval to contemplate. A human dream appears within it, that intelligence and beauty might live together. Chapter 3. A city bright before the drowning. Along the sea walls, one might imagine workers pausing in the late sun, looking out where open water brightens toward the horizon. Behind them lies the crafted certainty of the city. Before them lies the older world of waves and distance. Atlantis, in this sense, stands between two realms, nature and design, mystery and mastery, the untamed sea and the measured calm of human hands. Chapter 3. A city bright before the drowning. The gardens, too, deserve a place in this dream. Between stone courts and formal ways, there may be groves of shade and planted terraces cooled by channels of moving water. Leaves tremble lightly in the salt air. Birds settle, then lift again. These softer spaces keep the city from feeling severe. They remind us that even legendary power is easier to love when touched by gentleness. Chapter 3. A city bright before the drowning. Some say Atlantis endures because it allows every generation to picture its own ideal city. For Plato, it served a philosophical purpose. For later dreamers, it became a lost wonder beneath the sea. Tonight, we borrow only the calmest part of that inheritance, the image of ordered waters, sunlit stone, and a people moving through spaces made with patience, pride and quiet intelligence, pride and quiet intelligence, pride and quiet intelligence. Chapter 3. A city bright before the drowning. As evening approaches in our imagined city, the brightness softens. Harbour waters darken from gold to blue, and long shadows gather beneath arches and stairways. Lamps may begin to glow in doorways facing the canals. Voices would grow fewer now. Oars would rest. The fountains, however, continue their endless murmur, carrying the same peaceful note through daylight, twilight, and the first calm hours of Chapter 3. A city bright before the drowning. There is something especially restful in the idea of a city built in circles. The mind returns again and again to those rings of land and sea described in the ancient text. Circular forms promise enclosure, safety, return. They suggest that nothing is lost too quickly, that every path eventually bends homeward. In sleep, such images comfort us, ordered, repeating, and softly complete. Chapter 3. A city bright before the drowning. If this place never truly stood as described, its emotional truth still matters. People have long needed symbols of balance, cities where skill does not erase beauty, where prosperity does not banish peace, where public grandeur still leaves room for private stillness. Atlantis answers that longing with unusual clarity. It rises in the mind as a complete arrangement, lovely enough to grieve even before it fades. Chapter 3. A city bright before the drowning. For now, though, we do not let it fade. We remain in the bright hours, lingering beside sunlit channels and quiet courts. We feel warm stone beneath the hand, hear water folding into itself, and breathe the salt that drifts in from sheltered bays. In this chapter, Atlantis is not a warning yet. It is a tranquil possibility, held gently in the imagination. Chapter 3. A city bright before the drowning. The ancient world left many real marvels, harbours, palaces, temples, and cities shaped with extraordinary care. Atlantis belongs to a different realm, part philosophy, part legend, part longing. Yet when we imagine it, we often borrow from those true achievements. That may be why the dream feels convincing. It is woven from real human skill, then softened by distance. Chapter 3. A city bright before the drowning. So let the city rest a little longer in its hour of balance. Let the canals remain bright, the courtyards warm, the ships untroubled in their harbours. Let fountains hush the open spaces, and let evening gather slowly over ordered rings of land and sea. In the silence before the legend turns darker, Atlantis lives here, luminous, peaceful, and almost close enough to remember. Chapter 4. The Night the Waters Rose. In Plato's telling, the fate of Atlantis came not with trumpet calls or fiery spectacle, but with a sudden turning of fortune. After ages of strength and splendour, the island met a final day and night of misfortune. So we enter this part of the story gently, not to fear the sea, but to listen as memory folds into water, and legend drifts into silence. The once mighty island had already begun to change long before the sea closed over it. Plato suggests that virtue had thinned, and that the balance between wisdom and ambition had slowly faded. In sleepier language, we might imagine a bright hall growing dim at evening, not ruined at once but softened by time. Even great places, in story and in history, often begin to vanish inwardly before they disappear from sight. Then comes the phrase that has echoed for centuries, in a single day and night of misfortune. It is one of the most haunting passages in ancient writing, not because it lingers on terror, but because it is so brief. Everything that seemed lasting was overtaken almost at once. The swiftness of it gives the story its strange stillness, as if the world exhaled, and an entire island passed beneath that fading breath. Imagine the ground first as a faint trembling underfoot, a subtle shiver moving through streets, terraces, and temple courts. Not a violent convulsion in our telling, but a low reminder that the earth itself is never fully still. Stone remembers pressure, water remembers the moon, and somewhere beneath Atlantis, old forces gathered quietly, like distant thunder felt more in the bones than heard by the waiting ear. Above, the sky may have changed as well, clouds thickening over the island's high ridges and harbours, light withdrawing behind a grey veil. Ancient authors do not give us every detail, so we move with care and imagination here. A darkened sky belongs naturally to such a memory. It helps us feel the hush before loss, that suspended moment when birds grow quiet and the air seems to listen to itself. The canals that once carried commerce and ceremony might have reflected that dimming light in uneasy patterns. Water, so often ordered by walls and measured paths, may have begun to move with a will of its own. The sea at first does not need to roar. Sometimes it advances in subtle ways, a changing tide, a swelling edge, a rhythm no longer familiar. Those who watched would have felt that something ancient was returning. In the old account, Atlantis was both splendid and flawed, admirable in its design, yet vulnerable in spirit. That tension matters here. The sinking is not only an event of earth and sea, but the closing image of a moral tale. Plato was never simply mapping a place. He was also reflecting on power, order, and decline. Yet even when the lesson is stern, the sea in the story remains calm in its certainty. We can picture broad avenues, ringed harbours, and bridges crossing ordered waters, all the geometry of a city once planned with confidence. Then, slowly, that confidence meets a deeper pattern it cannot command. Human hands can raise walls, carve channels, and build monuments. But beneath every stone lies the patient earth, and around every island waits the older kingdom of the sea, quiet, immense, and never entirely conquered. As the story reaches its turning point, noise begins to fall away. There may be rumbling in the distance, the break of masonry, the rush of water through open spaces. Yet what remains in memory is not clamour, but the silence after it. Catastrophe in legend often arrives with a final hush, a stunned stillness when people realise that what stood yesterday is already passing into another element, another age, another name. Plato says the island sank beneath the sea, and afterward the waters in that region became difficult to navigate, clogged by shoals of mud. This detail gives the tale a curious afterlife, not only a city lost, but a sea altered by its loss. The memory lingers in the landscape itself. Sailors do not see towers beneath the surface. Instead, they meet troubled water and wonder what rests hidden below. There is something deeply human in that image, not ruins dramatically displayed, but traces concealed. Mud, depth, and distance become the keepers of the past. Atlantis survives not through visible stones, but through absence. The eye finds only open water, yet the mind continues to furnish what the waves have covered. In this way, the legend teaches us how memory works, preserving what cannot be touched by allowing it to remain half unseen. For listeners tonight, the fall of Atlantis can be heard less as punishment than as impermanence made gentle. Even the grandest design may one day soften, settle, and return to the wider world. This is not a cruel thought when spoken slowly. It can be strangely comforting. The things we carry, the things we build, the identities we polish so carefully, all belong to time, and time knows how to loosen every knot. Still, pride has its place in the story. Plato hints that prosperity and power led Atlantis away from balance. Across many traditions, civilizations are remembered not only for greatness, but for the moment greatness forgets its limits. Such tales endure because they speak in symbols we understand instinctively. A city can stand for a kingdom, a people, or a single heart, brilliant, accomplished, and yet slowly turning from its own best nature. The sea, by contrast, needs no pride. It simply waits, receives, and covers. There is a quiet majesty in that. Coastlines shift, harbours silt, islands rise and erode, all without anger. In stories of lost lands, the ocean is often the final archivist, keeping what it takes in cool darkness. It does not explain itself. It does not hurry. It only folds one world after another into its long and patient memory. Perhaps this is why Atlantis never truly disappears. A city destroyed by fire leaves ashes and charred walls. A city taken by water becomes dreamlike. The sea blurs edges, softens certainty, and invites return through imagination. Divers, poets, philosophers, and mapmakers have all followed that invitation in different ways. The Lost Island remains compelling because it is unreachable in just the right manner, hidden enough to resist proof, vivid enough to... If we linger on the final night, we need not fill it with sharp terror. Better to imagine lamps wavering in distant rooms, columns dim behind mist, and the low pulse of waves against stone that has always trusted its own endurance. Then comes the yielding. Streets become channels, foundations loosen, familiar paths dissolve, and all the while the sea continues its ancient work, not cruelly, simply completely, as water always completes its core. By morning, if morning can still be named, the shape of the island is changed beyond recognition. Where gardens, courts and harbours once ordered the land, there is only disturbed water and the fading memory of form. This is one reason the tale enters sleep so naturally. It moves from structure to softness, from architecture to current. The hard lines of the city disappear, and everything becomes fluid, dim and far away. Ancient listeners may have heard in this ending a warning about states and rulers. Modern listeners may hear something broader, a meditation on fragility. We live among systems that feel permanent while they are functioning well. Roads, towers, names, empires, even habits of thought can seem fixed. Then history reminds us, sometimes gently and sometimes not, that permanence is often only a feeling, persuasive, comforting, and never feeling, persuasive, comforting, and never fully guaranteed. There is also mercy in the brevity of Plato's account. He does not dwell on individual suffering or fill the scene with spectacle. He gives us the fact of disappearance and then the sea. That restraint leaves room for reflection. Instead of becoming trapped in panic, the mind turns toward meaning. We are asked to contemplate the vanishing itself, how quickly greatness can pass, and how quietly the world continues after it has passed. Some have searched for a real disaster behind the legend, perhaps distant memory of floods, earthquakes, or volcanic destruction carried through generations and reshaped into philosophy. Historians debate such connections carefully. What matters for our chapter is that the story feels true in an emotional sense, even if its geography remains uncertain. We know places can vanish. We know seas can claim shorelines. And we know seas can claim shorelines. After the sinking, what remains is not only loss, but a new kind of presence. Atlantis becomes an absence that influences thought. It invites questions about how societies flourish, why they decline, and what traces survive. A vanished city can exert remarkable power precisely because it cannot answer back. Each age returns to the silence and hears something different: warning, longing, curiosity, or the old desire to find beneath the waves what time has hidden. And so the darkened sky, the trembling ground, and the stillness that follows are more than scenery. They are the language of transition. One world closes, another begins. Not for the people of Atlantis, perhaps, but for those who remember them. The legend shifts from event to echo. Once the island is gone, imagination takes over the shoreline. Every calm expanse of water can seem to conceal a pattern, a wall, a sleeping history below. In the end, the fall of Atlantis endures because it joins two truths that rarely leave us. The first is that human beings build as if stone might last forever. The second is that nature answers in longer rhythms. Between those truths lies the beauty of the tale. It does not merely describe destruction, it describes scale, the small brightness of our designs set against the vast, untroubled patience of sea, earth, and passing time. So let the island rest now beneath its imagined waters, ringed harbours quiet, temples dim, avenues dissolved into the deep. Whether Atlantis was ever a place of earth and stone exactly as told matters less, in this moment, than what it teaches by vanishing. All things, however radiant, are held only for a while. Then the sea covers them gently, and the story remains, drifting above the depths like moonlight on midnight water. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. As the tale of Atlantis drifts softly into uncertainty, our path widens across the sea. Beyond legend, there are real places where cities slipped beneath the water and memory settled into silence. Tonight, we move gently from myth toward history, following the faint outlines of drowned streets and fallen stones, where the ocean keeps its own quiet record of human life. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. Along the coast of Egypt near Alexandria, divers have found vast remains resting below the harbour waters. There, pieces of the ancient royal quarter, along with monuments, statues and ruins from nearby settlements, now lie beneath the sea. Their presence reminds us that even famous centres of power were not fixed forever. Coastlines shifted, earthquakes struck, and the patient sea covered what earlier generations believed would always endure. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. Alexandria was once one of the great cities of the ancient world, linked to learning, trade, and royal ambition. Yet parts of its old landscape gradually sank or were claimed by seismic activity and coastal change. In the calm hush beneath modern waters, archaeologists have traced fallen columns and weathered blocks, finding not fantasy, but a real chapter of human history, preserved in fragments beneath the tide. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. These submerged remains near Alexandria stir the imagination because they feel so close to the stories people have always told. A city of brilliance, a shoreline altered, a world partly swallowed by the sea. But here, the wonder is grounded in evidence. We do not need to invent a vanished empire to feel awe. The truth itself is gentle and powerful enough. Stone, harbour and memory resting together underwater. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. Far to the northeast, in Greece, another remarkable place waits beneath shallow water, Pavlopetri. Often described as one of the oldest known submerged towns, it offers a rare glimpse into a Bronze Age settlement preserved under the sea. Streets, building outlines and tombs have all been identified there, allowing historians to study the shape of an ancient community that once stood dry beneath the sun. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. Pavlopetri is especially moving because it feels intimate. Rather than the remains of royal spectacle alone, it suggests ordinary life, pathways once walked, homes once entered, familiar spaces where people slept, worked and gathered. The sea that now ripples above those stones does not erase their humanity. Instead, it softens the scene, as though time itself has laid a cool hand over the town and asked it to rest. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. Archaeologists believe Pavlopetri was inhabited thousands of years ago, and its submergence was likely shaped by a combination of rising sea levels and tectonic activity. That quiet explanation matters. Human settlements do not need a single dramatic ending to disappear. Sometimes the land lowers little by little, sometimes the water advances, and over generations a shoreline becomes a memory, then a rumour, then... Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. Once we begin to notice these places, the pattern becomes larger and more tender. Coasts are never perfectly still. Rivers alter their paths, storms redraw beaches, earthquakes fracture harbours, and seas rise over centuries almost too slowly for one life to grasp. A village can begin at the edge of fertile water and end far below it. What feels permanent in one age can become hidden in another. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. Around the world, submerged landscapes have been found in many forms: drowned forests, ancient fish traps, ruined ports, and traces of settlements now offshore. Not every claim is grand, and not every discovery is fully understood. Yet together they reveal something profound. The meeting place of land and sea has always been delicate. Human history has often been written along coasts, and sometimes... Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. It is easy to see how stories of lost places would arise wherever waters covered familiar ground. Imagine elders pointing toward a bay and speaking of fields that once lay there, or sailors recalling broken walls glimpsed below a clear surface. Over time, memory gathers emotion. The facts remain, but they are wrapped in longing, warning and wonder, until history and legend begin to move side. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. This does not make every legend true in its details, but it does explain why such stories endure. People have watched the sea take land within living memory and across generations. They have seen storms destroy harbours and earthquakes alter entire coasts. When those experiences are repeated across centuries, the imagination responds naturally. It creates stories large enough to hold grief. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. In that sense, Atlantis belongs to a wider human feeling. Even if the city described by Plato remains unverified, the image of a world lost to water resonates because it touches something real. Many communities have faced the sea as both giver and taker, source of trade, food and beauty, yet also a force capable of erasing roads, walls, temples and the certainty of home. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. The drowned remains near Alexandria and the submerged streets of Pavlopetri remind us to separate wonder from certainty without losing either. We can admire the mystery while respecting evidence. We can listen to ancient stories and also attend carefully to geology, archaeology and time. In doing so, the past becomes richer, not smaller, a place where imagination opens the door and knowledge invites us. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. There is also a gentle humility in underwater ruins. On land, monuments often speak of triumph and permanence. Beneath the sea they feel quieter. Their edges are worn, their surfaces softened, their old power dimmed by distance and salt. What remains is not conquest, but endurance of another kind. The endurance of traces, of questions, of human presence. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. To drift mentally above such places is to sense how thin the line can be between the familiar and the forgotten. A harbour bustling with trade can become a field of scattered stone. A neighbourhood can turn into a pattern visible only from beneath clear water. The transformation feels dramatic to us, yet in nature it may unfold patiently, grain by grain, tremor by tremor, tide by tide. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. Modern underwater archaeology allows us to visit these hidden chapters with care. Divers, sonar mapping, photography and sediment study help reveal structures that would once have remained unknown. The work is often slow and exacting, which suits the subject well. The sea does not give up its history quickly. It asks for patience, for precision, and for the willingness to accept fragments for precision, and for the willingness to accept fragments where we might prefer. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. Fragments, though, can be deeply meaningful. A fallen column near Alexandria, a street plan at Pavlopetri, a cluster of submerged foundations elsewhere, each offers a point of contact between our present world and lives long gone. We do not hear their voices directly, yet the arrangement of stone and space still speaks. It tells us people were here, building, hoping, adapting, and trusting the ground beneath them. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. There is comfort, strangely, in this broader view. Atlantis may remain beyond proof, but the idea of drowned worlds no longer depends on a single lost city. Reality provides many examples, each quieter than myth, yet no less moving. The earth changes, coastlines migrate, and human places sometimes slip away. What survives is not always the whole city, sometimes only an... Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. When listeners imagine underwater ruins, the mind often reaches for spectacle. Towers, domes, glittering palaces. But many real submerged sites speak in smaller tones. A wall line, a harbour block, a stair leading nowhere we can now follow. These modest remains ask for a different kind of attention, one that is slower and more intimate. They invite us not merely to marvel, but to... Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. Impermanence is woven through all history, though the sea makes it visible in a haunting way. Water preserves and conceals at once. It can cradle what is left, even as it hides the full shape of what was lost. That double nature gives submerged places their emotional pull. We sense both absence and presence together, a vanished world close enough to imagine, yet distant enough to imagine, yet distant enough to remain elusive. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. Perhaps that is why drowned landscapes feel so dreamlike. They are real, measurable and studied, yet they also seem suspended outside ordinary time. Fish pass through streets once walked by people. Light moves across stones once touched by hands. Silence settles where voices once rose. The contrast is gentle rather than frightening, a reminder that the earth continues its slow transformations, whether or not we are there to witness them. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. As this chapter widens beyond Atlantis, it offers a softer conclusion than a mystery solved. We are not led to one secret map or one final answer. Instead, we are shown a pattern across centuries and shores. Settlements sink, coastlines change, and memory lingers. The sea becomes not just a setting for legend, but a real keeper of history, patient, immense, and full of unfinished stories. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. So when we return in thought to Atlantis, we do so with steadier eyes. We understand that its specific existence remains unverified, and that honesty matters. Yet we also know the deeper image is grounded in truth. There have been drowned quarters, submerged towns, and lost coastal worlds. The dream of a city beneath the waves survives because, in many forms, the world has made that dream real. Chapter 5. Echoes in Other Waters. Let the final image be a quiet one. Moonlight above a calm sea, and beneath it, old stones resting in darkness, still shaped by human hands. Some belong to known history, some to questions not yet answered. Together they teach us this. Atlantis may remain uncertain, but drowned worlds are not. And in that truth, the ocean keeps echo after echo of lives once lived beside its edge. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. Now the story enters the modern age, where quiet research vessels drift above dark water and teams prepare to descend through a dim blue hush. Archaeologists, divers and sonar specialists move with patient care, listening for echoes below. In the stillness between waves and breath, each descent begins with a simple hope that the sea may reveal what time has hidden. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. As engines soften and equipment settles, the ocean seems to widen into silence. Masks are checked, lamps are tested, and bubbles wait to rise like silver beads into the light above. Modern exploration does not rush. It enters slowly, respectfully, knowing that beneath the surface lie not only stones and wreckage, but fragile traces of human memory resting in cold water. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. Divers slip over the side and descend in measured calm, leaving the bright world behind. Around them, blue deepens into shadow, and the sound of their own breathing becomes a steady companion. Light from their lamps reaches only so far, touching drifting particles and bare rock. In that narrow glow, the seafloor begins to appear, silent, ancient, and almost dreamlike in its stillness. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. Long before a diver reaches the bottom, sonar teams begin their own quiet search from above. Instruments send sound into the depths and gather the returning shapes, turning darkness into faint outlines. A ridge, a wall, a broken line of stone, each signal invites closer study. What appears on a screen may be natural, or it may be the first whisper of a harbour long lost to the sea. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. Underwater cameras descend where currents allow, carrying human sight into places too narrow, deep, or delicate for immediate touch. Their beams sweep across sand, pottery fragments, timbers, and carved blocks softened by marine growth. The camera sees patiently, revealing contours that the eye might miss in motion. Later, on the surface, researchers study each frame with care, hoping a small detail. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. Archaeology beneath the sea is often an art of restraint. A site cannot simply be cleared in haste, because every layer of silt, every scattered object, preserves the order of a vanished moment. Divers measure, map and record before they lift even the smallest piece. In this slow practice, discovery becomes less like treasure hunting and more like listening, careful, deliberate and deeply respectful of the dead. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. Around the world, remarkable submerged places have emerged from this patient work. Off Egypt, the sunken remains near Thonis Heraklion revealed statues, anchors and temple ruins resting beneath the water. Along other coasts, drowned ports and quays speak of changing shorelines and restless seas. These are not Atlantis proven at last, but they remind us that whole landscapes can slip away. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. Near the coast of India, off Dwarka and in the Gulf of Kampat, underwater investigations have stirred curiosity and debate. Stone features, artefacts and changing seabeds have invited many interpretations, some cautious and some bold. Researchers continue to separate firm evidence from hopeful imagination. The deep can encourage wonder, but science moves carefully, asking what is truly there, what is natural. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. In the eastern Mediterranean, submerged towns and harbours offer quieter certainties. Earthquakes, subsidence and rising water have carried parts of ancient settlements below the surface. Pavements, walls, mooring stones and steps now meet fish and seagrass instead of sandals and trade. These places are real, documented and moving to behold. They show how easily the border between land and sea can shift across centuries. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. Off the coast of Japan, the monument at Yonaguni remains one of the most debated underwater sites in the world. Its terraces and angular faces have led some to see the work of human hands, while many geologists argue that natural processes can explain its form. The discussion continues without final agreement. It is a reminder that the sea often shapes stone into patterns that awaken ancient dreams. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. In the Caribbean and beyond, stories of roads, walls and drowned cities rise whenever unusual formations are found beneath clear water. Some prove to be beach rock or natural fracture lines. Others remain uncertain until more evidence appears. Again and again the process is the same: hope first, then testing, mapping, comparison and patient doubt. The romance of Atlantis survives, but proof demands more than resemblance. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. Shipwrecks also guide this chapter of the search, though they belong to different stories. A wreck can preserve cargo, tools, personal objects, and the shape of trade routes across lost centuries. Amphorae sleep in clusters, timbers rest beneath sediment, and anchors lie where they fell in panic or calm. These discoveries do not confirm Atlantis, yet they reveal how much the sea can keep when the land has forgotten. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. Sometimes the most important discoveries are not cities at all, but vanished coastlines. During colder ages, when sea levels were lower, plains and river valleys stretched far beyond modern shores. As waters rose, camps, pathways and settlements were swallowed gradually. Today, marine archaeologists and geologists search these drowned edges of the world, tracing ancient human movement through sediments, cores and faint patterns hidden beneath the sea. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. In these investigations, technology acts like a lantern carried into darkness. Side-scan sonar sketches the seafloor. Multi-beam systems measure its contours. Remote-operated vehicles drift where divers cannot linger. Photogrammetry turns overlapping images into detailed models of walls, wrecks and scattered objects. Yet for all this precision, the feeling remains strangely old, a human being leaning toward mystery. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. The sea floor itself has a powerful way of slowing thought. Sand settles over pottery rims. A fish passes through a doorway where no roof remains. Light falls in narrow shafts, then fades again into blue. Nothing below seems hurried. Even discovery arrives softly, as if the ocean insists that truth should be approached with calm breath and open attention. The deep rewards patience. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. Many expeditions begin with excitement and end with a more modest conclusion. A shape believed to be a wall may become a natural ridge. A geometric pattern may prove to be fractured bedrock. Such outcomes are not failures. They are part of honest inquiry, the careful narrowing of possibility. In this way, the search for Atlantis has also strengthened underwater science, teaching investigators how to distinguish wonder from evidence. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. And still, every so often, the sea offers something astonishing. A statue face emerges from silt. A harbour basin appears where maps showed only open water. A line of masonry confirms that people once lived where only fish now pass. These moments do not settle every legend, but they do enlarge the world. They remind us that history is not fixed on land alone. Part of it sleeps underwater. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. For listeners drawn to Atlantis, this may be the gentlest truth to accept. Modern exploration has uncovered remarkable submerged sites across many seas, yet no discovery has definitively proven Plato's lost island empire. No ruin, inscription or mapped foundation has closed the case. The dream remains open. But perhaps that openness is part of its power. Atlantis survives because certainty has never fully replaced loss. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. Beneath every careful survey rests an older impulse, one shared with sailors, priests and storytellers of long ago. Human beings have always looked toward the horizon and wondered what sank beyond memory. Today the helmets, cables and sensors are new, but the hope is ancient. Somewhere below there may be a fragment, a worked stone, a harbour edge, a pattern that changes the story we tell. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. Perhaps that is why underwater archaeology feels both scientific and poetic at once. Its methods are exacting, yet its stage is dreamlike: suspended bodies, drifting silt, distant beams and ruins touched by silence. A diver hovers before a fallen column, and for a moment centuries seem to fold together. The present does not conquer the past. It only approaches slowly, illuminated by a lamp in blue darkness. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. There are also places where the sea keeps its answer completely. Currents are too strong, depth too great, visibility too poor. Sediment buries what lies beneath by another patient layer each year. Some stories may never be confirmed, not because they are false, but because the evidence cannot yet be reached. In that unfinished space between knowledge and absence, imagination continues to breathe beside disciplined research. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. If Atlantis was never a literal city, the search has still mattered. It has led explorers toward real drowned worlds, real harbours, real losses, and real acts of preservation. Legends can mislead, but they can also direct attention toward forgotten questions. Underwater ruins remind us that civilizations are vulnerable, coastlines are changeable, and memory itself can sink unless someone... Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. So the divers continue their descent, bubble after bubble, lamp after lamp, into the cold and patient blue. They do not expect the sea to surrender all its secrets at once. Instead, they gather fragments, a shard, a contour, an anchor, a carved stone. From these pieces, history is rebuilt with humility. The lost city remains unproven, but the lost human path. Chapter 6. The Divers and the Lamps of the Deep. And at the end of each descent, when divers rise toward the trembling light of the surface, they bring back more than data. They carry a renewed sense that the world is older, deeper, and less complete than it seems. Atlantis has not been found with certainty. Yet each journey below keeps alive the same tender possibility that the deep may still return a fragment of a forgotten story.